Stranger Things has the best character chemistry on TV, and I don't mean romance. There's a reason people keep coming back to the show even when the plot gets predictable. It's not just 80s nostalgia or the monsters, it's these characters and the way they bounce off of each other. I spent weeks digging into what makes their group dynamic so magnetic, how Stranger Things balances character depth, tropes, and story structure to build what might be one of the best found families on screen. And it turns out, writing good dialogue isn't what creates chemistry. It's what happens before a word is even spoken. 4 elements create good chemistry, though many shows only focus on a few. Which is a bit ironic because emotional connection is something most of us can understand, even if it's only through our imagination. It's far more than romantic. Family, friendship, teamwork, all of these things require chemistry to feel truly valuable, giving our lives depth and purpose. And there's one character in Stranger Things who pretty much clicks with everyone. Dustin. Be it Steve, Robin, Eddie, Erica, the party, what makes him connect so effectively with such different people? The answer lies in those 4 elements I mentioned. Let me show you what I mean. First, we have context. For Dustin, that means being an only child who moved to Hawkins after his parents divorced, and barely having any contact with his dad. He's your classic 80s nerd, with a rare genetic disorder that affected his teeth, making him an easy target for bullies. But the thing is, Dustin has a great relationship with his mom. She takes his interests seriously, supports him, and lets him be unapologetically himself. So what we get is this morally grounded, optimistic kid who's never afraid to tell you how awesome he is. Now, you're probably thinking, isn't this just backstory? Sort of, but context is deeper than that. Context means characters, like people, have traits for a reason. Their backstory informs who they are in the story, how they interact, and the choices that they make. Second, we have conflict. There's plenty of that in Stranger Things, but let's stick to season 2. Here, Dustin faces 2 main sources of tension: the competition with Lucas for Max's attention, and secretly keeping Dart, a baby Demogorgon, as a pet. These conflicts actually overlap. Most of Dustin's attempts to connect with Max revolve around Dart, but Max is interested in the weird little creature, not Dustin, which causes tension with Lucas throughout the season. On top of that, Dustin lies to his friends about getting rid of Dart. That's when we see the first appearance of babysitter Steve, as the two team up to deal with a rapidly growing and very hungry Dart. At this point, both Dustin and Steve are pretty isolated. Dustin's desperate to impress Max, but he's already pushed away his friends and now has a monster problem after Dart eats his mom's cat. Meanwhile, Steve has lost his popular friends, just broken up with Nancy, and is stumbling towards graduation with no real future lined up. Their dynamic works in part because of that isolation, because both are in transit, unsure of where they belong, which brings us to the third element, connection. By season 4, Dustin is arguably closest to Steve, thanks to what they built across seasons 2 and 3. They're both labeled as annoying or kinda useless by their peers, however, within their own 2-person group, they function very differently. If we borrow from Dungeons & Dragons in true Stranger Things fashion, Steve is a barbarian. Spiked bat, able to take a beating, not very bright. He's also an outsider once he stops hanging out with the popular kids and fails to go to college. Dustin is a bard. He's witty, social, knows the lore of near everything, and can sing his little heart out. They balance each other, and that balance is never offset, even when others join them. Erica, Robin, they're essential for specific things, like Russian translation or crawling through vents, but they never undermine Dustin and Steve's core chemistry. They just round it out. And that's the point of connection. Great chemistry means every character brings something different that gives the relationship purpose. So lastly, we have subtext. It brings context, conflict, and connection together with depth. Take season 3. Dustin comes home from camp excited to tell his friends about his girlfriend Susie and shows off the radio tower he built to talk to her. But when he demonstrates it for the party, the signal doesn't work. His friends laugh at him, saying Susie isn't real. Then they ditch him right before the radio starts working. So what does Dustin do? He goes straight to Steve to vent. And here's where the subtext kicks in. On the surface, it's just Dustin being dramatic about his friends leaving, but remember the context. This is a kid who got pity danced by Nancy 6 months earlier, who doesn't have siblings or a father to talk to, and whose mother is emotionally dependent on him, so he can't vent to her. This conflict isn't just about the radio. It's about being humiliated again. about having his one big success story from camp completely dismissed. And the connection with Steve? They're both kinda losers at this point. Steve's lost his popular friends, Dustin's been ditched by his. Steve can handle Dustin's frustration because he's been there. He gets what it's like to be written off. That's subtext. It's not what they're saying, it's everything underneath that we can empathize with. All that context, conflict, and connection work together to create chemistry deeper than snappy banter and one-liner quips. And Dustin is just one example. So let's dig deeper, because the better you understand characters, the more powerful their dynamics become. Because when we talk about chemistry, we're not talking about something unseen. It's a spark, one that's built from context, purpose, connection, and conflict all rubbing together until something catches. Most writers miss that those 4 elements only work when you understand what each character is supposed to do in your story. So how do you define a character's purpose? Most creatives start with personality MBTIs or enneagrams, which are all fine and good, but they're like new Coke. All the pretty labels promising something better than ever, but inside, nothing but disappointment awaits. People, including within the same personality type, come in a variety of flavors. To really understand a character, to make their dialogue, chemistry, and growth effortless, you have to start with their context. Otherwise, you won't know their purpose or function in the story, and to do this effectively, you need to know what a character's arc is going to be. For this, let's look at the difference between Steve's arc in Seasons 1 and 2, and 3 and 4. In Season 1, Steve is the type of main love interest we find in most 80s teen movies. He's rich, crazy popular, self-centered, and dismissive when his pride is threatened. But over time, he surprises everyone by owning up to his mistakes, like apologizing to Jonathan and getting him a new camera, and stepping up to fight the Demogorgon with a baseball bat. This season sets the foundation for his redemption. In Season 2, Steve's character evolves significantly. After being dumped by Nancy, he forms an unlikely and heartwarming bond with Dustin. He protects the younger kids during dangerous encounters and takes on the mom role of the group. By the end of the season, he's no longer Nancy's ex-boyfriend, he's earned his place as a fan favorite and group protector. In Season 3, Steve works at Scoops Ahoy, feeling directionless after high school. His friendship with Robin deepens, especially after she comes out to him, and his bond with Dustin reaches the "you die, I die" level. Though he's not traditionally successful, he gains confidence in who he is through these relationships and redefines what success and identity mean for him. As of Season 4, now more mature and emotionally aware, Steve continues to risk his life for the group without hesitation. We see signs of lingering feelings for Nancy, but this time it's quieter, more thoughtful. He reflects on wanting a family one day, showing how far he's come from the shallow guy we met in Season 1. He's brave, selfless, and solidly reliable. The guy you want in your corner. So, we know his arc. What's his function in the story? Steve Harrington is the redemption of wasted potential. He's someone who's handed everything but only becomes truly valuable when he chooses to protect people he would once have ignored. This function is easily covered by his context. Steve starts as a privileged, popular teen with no real direction. His status comes from charm, not character. His backstory, wealthy parents who are absent assholes, coasting through life, shallow relationships, sets up a person who has never had to try too hard or take care of anyone but himself. Each season builds on that foundation. His losses, Nancy, popularity, future, strip away his surface, revealing someone who chooses self-worth through service, not status. Through his growing relationships with outcasts like Dustin and Robin and his repeated choice to put himself in danger for others, Steve's arc subverts the dumb jock trope. As his fight in Season 1 with Jonathan proves, Steve doesn't fight because he's the strongest. He's just the one who shows up, bat in hand, every single time. You see, Steve's backstory defines his role, but there's one more essential piece to context. Because once you know what a character is meant to do, you need to start shaping how they accomplish it. This is the foundation of character dynamics and how chemistry is built, and it's where things start to get really fun. We all know part of Stranger Things' popularity is due to nostalgia and how it weaves 80s pop culture into the story, but narratively, the Duffer Brothers know what they're doing, especially in how they tie in Dungeons and Dragons. And no, you don't need to know how to roll for initiative or what Thaco is to understand this. You just need to understand, in D&D, everyone has a role in the party. That means every character brings something different to the table. What I mentioned about context is the start of mapping out personalities, group functions, and it gives the ensemble structure, so character arcs like chemistry don't happen by accident. The main party, confirmed by the Duffer Brothers, consists of 6 characters: Mike, Will, Lucas, Dustin, Elle, and Max. These are the characters the plot always revolves around, even when they're separated. In D&D, they line up with Paladin, Wizard, Ranger, Bard, Sorcerer, and Zoomer, which doesn't exist, so I'll go with Rogue. But the interesting thing, aside from Dustin, fan favorites aren't on this list, because Stranger Things actually has 4 character groups with different functions. You've got the main party, then allies, NPC allies, and what I call post-mortem allies, characters who've died but still influence the story. Let's focus on the 2 big groups, the main party and allies. Among these characters, everyone has a clear D&D inspired function, and at first glance, some characters might appear to share qualities. Will and Eleven are connected to the Upside Down, Mike and Hopper are leaders, Dustin, Robin, and Eddie are all music lovers, Jonathan and Steve are meat shields, but their functions are very different. Will is a mixed bag of qualities. Originally a wizard with a cleric function, he's somehow able to cast fire spells. That is, until he's taken by the Mind Flayer. Like his hidden sexuality and discomfort within the friend group after his time spent in the other Hawkins, he's alienated, never really fitting into the box that others slip so easily into. Elle, meanwhile, is a sorcerer, a person innately born with inhuman power. Unlike Will, who is at ease after he's cut off from the Mind Flayer, Elle struggles to find her place in the world once she's lost her power, which is her fundamental purpose within the story. Both characters are touched by otherworldly forces and struggling to fit in with their friends, but their journeys couldn't be any more opposite. We can look at this differently by putting Mike and Hop side by side. I might be biased, but I don't love paladins. They're self-righteous, overly zealous, utterly inflexible, so yeah, Mike. But paladins often arrive at being enforcers of justice and goodness after fighting their own darkness. A sort of Dark Knight to Paladin pipeline, which is where Hop comes in. In Season 1, he's kind of an asshole. Granted, he's hanging on by a thread, divorced, grieving his daughter, which he blames on his time during the Vietnam War. But through the story, we see him connect with Eleven and the rest of the characters with renewed purpose to cast evil from the world. Lastly, I think it's important to look at this from the perspective of 3 characters who are all dearly loved, all the same class, but wildly different. Eddie, Dustin, and Robin. You can probably guess they're bards. They love music, have theatrical personalities, and there's no denying their charisma gravitates other people toward them. This is where archetypes come in. See, most D&D classes have subclasses, which mix mechanics with personality, and this level of detail is what I found really fun. Eddie's clearly from the College of Glamour. Originally tied to the Feywild, aka sparkly, chaotic magic land, these bards are meant to dazzle crowds and disturb the status quo. Swap out Feywild for Metallica and you've got Eddie, feared and adored, and ending his arc with one of the most iconic performances in the whole show. Dustin's from the College of Lore, the info hoarders, the ones collecting trivia, folk tales, obscure knowledge, and won't shut up about it. He's not just smart, he's observant. He watches people, tracks patterns, and uses what he knows to hold the group together. While investigating Vecna, Dustin figured out how the portals worked, how Vecna targeted his victims, and devised a plan to strike while Vecna was distracted. Dustin might play the comic role, but his actual role is the group's strategist and quiet diplomat. Robin, meanwhile, is from the College of Whispers. These bards don't perform for crowds, they infiltrate them. They slip into places where they don't quite belong and use what they know to shift the story. She wears 1,000 hats. Scoops Ahoy employee, codebreaker, band geek, fake straight girl, Nancy's tag-along. And that one's important. She doesn't just support Nancy. She's the reason they get to Victor Creel, a meeting that was essential to saving Max. So yes, Eddie, Dustin, and Robin are all bards, but they don't feel the same because that's the magic behind character dynamics. And when a character is built with intention, not just vibes or random quirks, you get sparks. Which brings us to the final pieces of Stranger Things puzzle: connection and conflict. We've seen how character context and purpose lay out the foundation, so we can finally talk about how chemistry plays out. From the way we connect with others to how power dynamics shift as we grow up. And when you understand this, you see how Stranger Things uses connection and conflict not just to create chemistry, but to tell its story. This is a little dense, so let's take this one layer at a time, starting with connection. This element is about how characters sometimes understand each other better than they understand themselves. Let's start with Jonathan. Forget Nancy for a second. Jonathan's relationship with Will says more. And yeah, in season 4, he's checked out, but for the first time, he's around Argyle. Someone who isn't there for Will or Nancy or Joyce, but him. It's a big shift for someone who's always been defined by supporting others. Jonathan has been a good guy since season 1. It's part of his purpose in the story to ground the chaos with something gentle and loyal. The fact he read Will's emotions while solidly stoned says a lot. He promises to be there for Will when life gets a little more complicated than Legos up the nose. And it lands with enough weight that Will hugs him like he did as a child because he knows Jonathan has never considered, should I stay or should I go? The same can't be said for Max. As someone who struggles with their mental health, Vecna, the personification of guilt, depression, and suicidal ideation, is an incredibly effective villain. He isolates you, convinces you the people around you can't help, a lie initially comforting to Max. Her context is complicated. She's grieving someone she hated and loved in equal measure. She's pulled away from her mom, her friends, everyone. And Vecna targets her because she believes she deserves it. She's living out her make a deal with God to trade our places guilt after Billy's death. Lucas sees it, how Max's letters are her resignation to her fate, a moment of calm before the end, when everyone around you thinks things are finally okay, but you're just comforted by the idea the pain will soon be over. Her escape from Vecna is probably the single most powerful scene in the series thus far. It's a visual manifestation of outrunning the darkness, ripping free of depression's grasp, and coming back to the people who never gave up on you. The bonds between these characters are just that strong, it's impossible not to get invested in them. But connection alone doesn't make chemistry. Sometimes it's that what a character wants from a relationship isn't what they need. And that tension is where some of the most interesting dynamics emerge. Whether it's romance or friendship, the way a character chooses between what they want and what they actually need reveals where they're headed in the story. Let's go back to Nancy. She might come from the most stereotypically normal family on the show, but she's one of the most driven and quietly rebellious characters. Her want is to prove herself, to be taken seriously, to do something meaningful, and for a long time, that's tangled up in her relationship with Jonathan. He supports her not just as a partner, but as someone who sees her, who doesn't ask her to go back to normal like Steve once did. That kind of chemistry works not because it's perfect, but because it reflects what she truly needs. Someone who believes in her convictions, not just her comfort. Now compare that to her younger brother, Mike. What Mike wants isn't exactly what he needs. He isn't as smart as Dustin, as social as Lucas, or as special as Will, but that makes him the most realistic teenager in the show. His want is to be needed, to be the glue, the hero, the one who fixes everything. But what he needs is what most teenagers need, to grow up. Season 3 really focused on the flaws in his relationship with Elle, and yeah, maybe they undercut his character by making him mostly about that relationship, but it speaks volumes to his purpose in the story. He embodies the worst parts of a paladin. He's inflexible, self-righteous, and emotionally constipated. But he also has the best parts: loyalty, faith, and goodness. The Mike and Elle relationship has always been at the center of the show, and even if it's kinda cringy, it's probably meant to be. Mike is the emotional anchor for Elle in a world that constantly tries to tear her apart. That I love you moment in season 4 matters not just because Elle needs to hear it, but because it comes from someone who isn't powerful or cool, he's just Mike. And that's enough for her. He's joked that he's Lois Lane, and Mike kind of is. He's the person who reminds the superhero that she's loved. And then there's Lucas. Where Mike clings to being the emotional support for someone powerful, Lucas just wants to matter on his own terms. He starts season 4 wanting to be cool, to be appreciated outside the group, to finally be not just the nerdy kid with a slingshot, and honestly, that want makes perfect sense. He's growing up in a small, very white town in the 80s. There's so much pressure to adapt, blend in, but what he needs isn't popularity, it's conviction. Lucas's real strength shows up not when he's scoring baskets, but when he chooses his friends. When he's there for Max even when she's distant and hurting. That's what makes him one of the most emotionally intelligent characters on the show. He wants to be a knight, the big stoic fighter, but he's a ranger. Quick, loyal, aware. Someone who sticks to the outskirts but always knows where to aim. Now, we've seen how context, purpose, connection, and need versus want shape Stranger Things, but ultimately what makes or breaks chemistry is conflict. I had a hard time picking for this part. There's just so much, but at Stranger Things' heart, it is a story about the horrors of growing up. Power dynamics, like those between adults who for the most part tend to be pretty clueless and useless, and children who are capable of seeing the true depths of evil, are huge. For one, we have Hopper and Elle. Conflict between them isn't because he's a bad parent or she's a horrible daughter. His want to protect collides with her need to grow up. This isn't unique to Hopper, though. Brenner wants Eleven to be safe, but only if it's on his terms. He can't see that connection isn't built through ownership. It's built when you let someone pursue their own needs. That's why Hopper's connection with Elle comes easily, while Brenner only finds it in his final moments. Another dynamic like that between Mrs. Wheeler and her children is a seriously underrated part of Stranger Things. Karen lets her kids think she's wallpaper, while Ted slowly turns into the furniture, but under that is a woman told her whole life she wasn't smart or special enough, yet raised fiercely independent children. She doesn't let Mike disrespect his sister without consequences, yet she's there when he falls apart after losing Will. When Nancy lies to the police about Barb, Karen demands the truth. But when Nancy is fired from the paper, she listens. She encourages Nancy to go after something if she thinks it's worth it. Why not, she tells her. Finish it. That sort of gentle conflict is powerful. It shifts perspectives. It shows her kids and us that their mother is always on their side. While conflict complicates connection, it's also what creates chemistry, the moment when context, conflict, and connection ignite something earned. Those relationships are unforgettable not because of how they start, but how they unfold under pressure. This is the spark of Stranger Things. Such planning makes it so that imagining the show without these specific characters in this specific arrangement during this time is impossible. It's why fighting monsters in Stranger Things is the secondary horror of the series. The primary fear is separation, of goodbyes to a small town where nothing of any particular importance should happen, but a whole hidden world has been found while spending time with your best friends. Because Stranger Things isn't just about what they're afraid of, it's about how they hold on to each other anyway, how people grow up, break apart, mess up, and still choose to stay. And that's what makes its chemistry so strong. Not just that these characters care about each other, but that they keep finding their way back. In the end, that's the most powerful kind of connection, the one that survives growing up. If you made it this far, thanks for sitting with me through the growing pain Stranger Things has to offer. And if you're counting down the days to the final season, ditto. That's why I'm Pickle Ditto, because whatever storytelling pickle you're in, I've probably been there too.